Ladies and gents, Napoleon 1813 Battle of Nations. We are about to be in the end of the series of Napoleonic Wars. With this, it's just 3 videos left. And so far, this has been a great history. Who knew that history, at least Napoleonic War, was this interesting? I didn't. Because before watching this, all the videos, I had no idea about any of the Napoleonic Wars. I'm just learning history as I watch these videos. Napoleon was great at first. He has all these new tactics. He always used tactics in a way that always surprised his enemies. He was great general, one of the best generals of all time. But after some wins, Napoleon started to make mistakes. Mostly, you could argue it's because of his ego grew, or maybe it's just some mistake. Nobody's perfect. But Napoleon started to make a lot of mistakes. People started to learn his techniques. He left Spain and Portugal untouched and then invaded Russia with 500,000 of his army. That was, I think, one of the biggest stupid thing he did, because he should have just taken over Portugal, Spain before trying to invade Russia. And not just that, he invaded Russia without much of proper, care, without much thought. He just thought he's just going to go there and take over Russia without thinking much that how he's going to require some things to battle cold and things like that. And that mistake cost nearly 500,000 lives. Nearly all his army died while trying to, retreat back to France. That was just, it was like a horror movie, watching a horror movie. He made all his way up to the Moscow, but from Moscow, as soon as winter came, he had to just run back. Russians I think are kind of stronger in the winter because they kind of adapted to it. Of course, in the end, winter is winter, cold is cold. But still, Russians got the edge. Russians were chasing French, and French was just, or Napoleon and his army was just retreating back, and they lost nearly 500,000 men. So that was some surreal thing that I ever saw. And after that, Russians just chased him through, Germany, and just tried to chase him all the way to France. And this is one of the key points, because while trying to take over Europe, while trying to strong arm everybody, he took place one after another. Even though people who made treaties with him, they made treaties because they were afraid of him. Now, since he looks weak, those people are going to rise up again. As we see in the last videos, people are starting to rise up again. So this is one weakness that's going to be his downfall, the biggest mistake he made by trying to invade Russia and losing 500,000 men, because now his mistake of being Napoleon is kind of fading away. So people are going to rise up against him. Lots of countries are going to rise up against him. Prussia and everybody rising against him. That's just, Prussia turning, Sweden now trying to attack France with Britain's backup, with massive backup, money, equipment. That's also a big thing. He's one of the marshals, Murat, ran away, basically become traitor. But then he came back and Napoleon let him in too. That's kind of show me how desperate Napoleon is, because he lost lots of veterans in the trying to invade Russia. Austria, his father-in-law is, king of Austria or something, whatever they called. But even that didn't help him, because now Austria has also turned against him. Austria tried to, I'm going to break peace between them and things like that, but Napoleon didn't go for him. And Austria turned his back against Napoleon too. His army is now consist of all the new recruits, because lots of experienced soldiers died in trying to invade Russia. He's basically, I think, 2-1. His enemies are nearly doubled than his army, and they are kind of experienced, while Napoleon's are all new recruits. Granted, Napoleon is at the helm, so that got to make some difference. This is going to be, I haven't seen this video. I haven't seen videos after this, obviously. I'm seeing it as I do reactions. But I think he's gonna lose badly. This is definitely his downfall. 3 videos are left, and the way things are going, the new recruits, only half of the army that coalition has. I think he's gonna lose now. But how badly is he going to lose? That's gonna make a difference. So yeah, let's watch it. Battle of Nations.
October 1813. Napoleon Bonaparte faced his greatest crisis since becoming Emperor of the French 9 years before. His long war in Spain had ended in defeat, and an Anglo-Spanish-Portuguese army had now crossed the Pyrenees to invade France itself. In Germany, the Kingdom of Bavaria had switched sides and joined the Sixth Coalition against France. While in Saxony, Napoleon faced 4 armies converging on him from all directions.
I don't know why he thought spearheading straight through was a better idea, because that will give chance for people to just flank his supply line. He should have gone from one side if he wanted to take over this coalition. Spearing it directly, it's going to result really badly, I think.
What's more, these were not the same bunglers he'd crushed in 1805 and 6 at Austerlitz and Jena.
They've learned.
Prussia, Austria and Russia had all learned from their mistakes. They were now better organized, trained and led, and more wary of Napoleon. The largest coalition force was the Army of Bohemia, commanded by Austrian Field Marshal the Prince of Schwarzenberg. His was a huge mixed Austrian-Russian-Prussian army of 194,000 men and 790 guns. To the north, Blücher's Army of Silesia and the Army of the North under Napoleon's ex-Marshal Bernadotte, now Crown Prince of Sweden. Together, 130,000 men and 536 guns. To the southeast, General Bennigsen's Army of Poland, besieging Dresden. Another 34,000 men and 135 guns. In total, the coalition had fielded 360,000 men and 1,500 guns, with Russia supplying the bulk of the troops. One unique addition to Bernadotte's Army of the North was a single troop of British rocket artillery, an experimental weapon system based on the Congreve rocket, a type seen here in 1830. Although wildly inaccurate, their high-explosive warhead could be devastating at close range.
This is the case with Britain in past 3-4 centuries. They might not have the largest army or largest of much of anything, but they always have technology. In past Napoleonic wars somewhere, they also had muskets that could have shot at a really long distance compared to the France. And now they have this experimental missile launcher of some kind.
Napoleon's forces around Leipzig were outnumbered almost 2 to 1. But with 200,000 men and 700 guns, the Grande Armée was still a force to be reckoned with many experienced troops and commanders, even though it increasingly relied on young conscripts to make up numbers. There were another 140,000 men that Napoleon could not call on. General Rapp's 10th Corps besieged in Danzig, Marshal Saint-Cyr's 1st Corps besieged in Dresden, Marshal Davout's 13th Corps holding Hamburg, as well as several smaller besieged garrisons across Germany and Poland.
Damn, Davout was stuck at Denmark. That's a big issue because Davout can be, really crucial during the battle. Past Napoleonic wars, since the start, Dow's, only few times been there at the battlefield with Napoleon. Lots of time he's always preoccupied or something like that, or just Napoleon doesn't call him. Even though it proves that he single-handedly defeated major armies, while Napoleon, mistook some other army as the main army. So that's an issue, and I think, those small garrisons around Warsaw and everywhere, why isn't he calling them? I get it, he needs to hold that place, but why does it matter? Prussia and everybody turned already. If he doesn't win this battle, holding out that places won't make much of a difference. So right now, after coalition and this bigger number, it would have been better to call them back to the main battle. Because if they loses this one, the war is at France. I understand the Denmark one, because if Dow, leaves that area, and they could just attack France.
Napoleon was currently about 20 miles north of Leipzig with the bulk of his army. Marshal Murat was 40 miles to the south with 90,000 men, covering Schwarzenberg. Napoleon now decided to rapidly join Murat, and with their temporary superiority in numbers, defeat Schwarzenberg before Bernadotte and Blücher could intervene. Murat had orders to conduct a fighting withdrawal northwards.
Alright, so out of this coalition, the Austrian army is the biggest one, the Bohemian army. So he's thinking, if I should take out that one, it's gonna be easier. But what I think is, he's surrounded by coalition armies over at all three sides. So taking on the larger army would take time to defeat them, and at that time others could flank Napoleon. Wouldn't it make sense if you defeat the smaller army first and decrease their direction where they could attack?
But at Liebert-Volkwitz, he was drawn into major combat with the enemy's advance guard. Around 12,000 horsemen fought what some have described as the largest cavalry battle in Europe's history.
Lots of dead horses.
Murat, in the thick of it as usual, was very nearly captured by Prussian dragoons. The battle ended in a minor coalition victory, with around 2,000 casualties on each side. The next day, Napoleon arrived to take command. This video is sponsored by the Great Courses Plus, home of more than 11,000 on-demand video lectures.
Then Napoleon arrived to take command.
From science and maths to the natural world and history. The Great Courses Plus regularly update their content, so you could watch a documentary on coronavirus, or courses on infectious diseases or historical pandemics. But to the Great Courses.
Yeah, people, go to thegreatcoursesplus.com/epichistorytv and support the channel.
Plus for sponsoring this video.
Those are some big words.
By the 16th of October, Napoleon had concentrated most of his forces south of Leipzig. Field Marshal Schwarzenberg, meanwhile, against Russian advice, had deployed his army on either side of the Pleiße River, which would hinder his movements throughout the battle. Napoleon had entrusted the northern sector to Marshal Ney, with orders to keep an eye out for Blücher and Bernadotte. But Napoleon didn't expect them for at least another day, and so Ney had orders to transfer most of his troops south for the attack on Schwarzenberg. Schwarzenberg, however, knew that Blücher and Bernadotte were closer than Napoleon suspected, and that Bennigsen was also marching up from Dresden. This was the moment the coalition had been waiting for. All their armies converging on Napoleon, with overwhelming superiority in numbers. However, the coalition's headquarters were nothing like Napoleon's, where one man's will decided all. Schwarzenberg had to attempt to coordinate the actions of 3 large armies from 3 separate states. And although he was commander-in-chief, his plans still needed to be approved by Emperor Alexander, the supreme commander, whilst he also managed relations with the King of Prussia and the Emperor of Austria, all of whom were present at his headquarters. The plan finally agreed was for General Wittgenstein's corps group to lead an attack in 4 main columns.
This is ridiculous, look at that. Napoleon is surrounded by every side. This is a dangerous position to be in because they could easily circle around and cut off his supply to the France. And since, Napoleon is attacking Bohemian army first, since it's the largest of the coalition, and clearly they would have all agreed that since Napoleon is kind of trapped, let's just go everybody. Napoleon is thinking they are kind of far away, but they are not. So I think what's gonna happen, Napoleon try to take Bohemian army head first. Others are gonna come and flank him. This is going to be a massive disaster.
With 2 Austrian flanking attacks west of the Pleiße. At 8 a.m, a bombardment began along the line, as Russian, Austrian and Prussian infantry regiments advanced across cold, muddy fields. Wachau soon fell to Russian infantry, but French artillery fire made it impossible for them to advance further. Victor's Second Corps then counterattacked, retaking the village at bayonet point. Wachau would change hands twice more that morning. These bloody contests for small Saxon villages would come to typify the fighting around Leipzig. At Markkleeberg, Kleist's Prussians...
Did the people of this town evacuate when this battle happened, or are they there when the battle is happening? Because that is just horrifying, man. The battle happens all around you. One army takes over, then another army takes over. There's going to be lots of casualties, man.
Second Corps drove out the Polish defenders after bitter fighting, while on the left bank of the Pleiße, Merveldt's Austrian Second Corps struggled across broken ground to attack well-defended villages. Their assault on Konnewitz stalled, but with heavy losses, the Austrians got a toehold in Dörlitz. On the right flank, around 10 a.m, Klenau's 4th Corps occupied the high ground of the Kolmberg and fought its way into Liebertwolkwitz. Napoleon, observing from Gallows Hill, ordered up Augereau's 9th Corps and the Young Guard in support. MacDonald's 11th Corps was now also arriving in position on his left. His troops retook the Kolmberg and counterattacked Liebertwolkwitz, driving out the Austrians and pursuing them over the fields beyond. The advance was only halted when Russian Cossacks were sighted on their open left flank, a warning that Bennigsen's army was not far off.
Damn.
The coalition offensive was going nowhere, with most of its modest gains lost to French counterattacks. But there was one sector where the coalition had more success that morning. General Goulay's Austrian Third Corps, with orders to threaten Napoleon's line of retreat, advanced over marshy ground towards Lindenau.
This is going to be a massive issue, because if you're fighting in all fronts, okay, you're fighting a major army, Bohemian army, sure, but there's going to be a certain, group of people, group of soldiers that are trying to cut out your, retreat route to France. So now you have to send certain people there to, hold them off. You have to send certain people in other direction where other armies could come. So your numbers can thin out, and you're already 2 to 1 outnumbered. So this is a really dangerous position to be in.
Ney had to divert Bertrand's 4th Corps to reinforce the village and ensure the road to France was kept open. Napoleon was waiting for Ney's reinforcements before launching his attack on Schwarzenberg. But now 4th Corps was tied down at Lindenau, and there was more bad news from Ney. Blücher's army of Silesia was approaching from the northwest. Marmont's 6th Corps had to turn about to keep the Prussians at bay. Heavy fighting broke out around Meukern, the village itself held by elite French Marines, while Dąbrowski's Polish division clung on to Wiedrich under attack from an entire Russian corps.
Damn.
This was a nasty surprise for Napoleon, who'd thought Blücher was still a day's march away. But the old Prussian general, hearing cannon fire to the south, had urged his men on and into the attack. Blücher intended to draw as many French troops onto himself as possible to assist Schwarzenberg's army of Bohemia. His actions and the bloody fight for Meukern may just have saved the coalition from defeat.
This is one dangerous thing, man, because one army is trying to help our other army, because as collective they just want to defeat Napoleon. So even though these are coalition consist of different army from different countries, they are using the tactics like they are the one army. They are endangering their own men, because in the other side other army could get an edge, because in the end they are part of coalition trying to take down Napoleon.
Napoleon was outnumbered across the whole battlefield. But in the south he still had a numerical advantage, not as large as he'd hoped, nor likely to last long. Schwarzenberg and Alexander were already moving up reserves, though Schwarzenberg now found that his were on the wrong side of the Pleiße River, costing precious hours. It was now or never for Napoleon. At 2 p.m, he ordered the attack to begin. A grand battery of 180 guns blasted the enemy lines. Then Victor's 2nd Corps, Lauriston's 5th Corps, and the Young Guard began their advance. In support, Murat gathered 2 entire cavalry corps, 10,000 horsemen, and led them in one of the great mass cavalry charges of the Napoleonic Wars. Cuirassiers of the 1st Heavy Cavalry Division broke through to the main enemy battery.
That's a massacre,
Some
damn.
even nearly reached the 3 coalition monarchs. But the ground was marshy and broken by fences and ditches. The French horses were soon exhausted and the squadrons disordered. Austrian cuirassiers and Russian Guard cavalry were coming up from the south. When these fresh Allied cavalry reserves charged the French, a great melee ensued. But the French were eventually driven back to their start line.
Damn, gained nothing.
Maison's division of the 5th Corps was involved in a desperate struggle for Geldengosse. The fighting swept back and forth through the village, the streets filling with dead and wounded from both sides. But as Russian and Prussian Guard regiments arrived to reinforce the village, the French were forced to fall back. Around 4 p.m, the Austrian Reserve Corps finally arrived and renewed the assault on Markkleeberg, one of the morning's objectives, which was finally secured. By 5 p.m, it was clear that Napoleon didn't have enough reserves to force a decisive outcome in the south. To the north, Meukern was being stubbornly held by French Marines with lethal close-range artillery support.
Alright, see, this is what I was saying. Napoleon is outnumbered against Bohemian army. If he try to take on the big army first before taking the others, what's going to happen is he's not going to do that, obviously. It would take a massive long time. Even if he can win, during those times others could close in like it's happening in the north. So what's going to happen is people's morale is going to go down, like we are surrounded. There will be the mentality in all the soldiers in the French army, and they are just going to get closer and closer and get trapped. What he should have done is wait for the northern army to come and take them on, and then try to take on the others like Bohemian army and others. He assumed that they would be far off, but that assumption is going to be really costly now.
But despite terrible losses, York's Prussian corps continued to attack. Marshal Marmont himself was wounded twice, but remained in command. Finally, a brilliant charge by Prussian hussars triggered a French rout. Merkern fell as Marmont's corps streamed back towards Leipzig. As dusk fell around 6 p.m, fighting died out across the battlefield. The first day of the battle had cost the French an estimated 25,000 casualties. The coalition at least 30,000.
Whoa.
Napoleon had come close, but failed to land a decisive blow.
This might feel like that, yeah, France less lost than coalition, but, we need to understand something, that Napoleon is outnumbered 2-1, so 25,000 dead in France and coalition only 30. That's not going to much help. If it was more than double casualties on the opposing side in the coalition, you could say that Napoleon is still holding his own. But it's just 5,000 difference, that's not much, man. He's still 2-1 outnumbered.
The chance for victory was slipping from his grasp.
Damn, these are some heavy things, man.
Sunday the 17th of October brought a lull, with both armies exhausted by the previous day's fighting. Napoleon needed to rest his troops and resupply them with ammunition, which was running dangerously low. He also sent a message to his father-in-law, Emperor Francis I, suggesting an armistice and finally offering concessions. But the Allies were no longer interested. They knew time was on their side. The only major combat that day occurred in the north, where Blücher continued to attack. Russian infantry stormed Eutrich and Gorlice. Russian hussars charged and routed part of Arrighi's 3rd Cavalry Corps. That day, Napoleon received 14,000 reinforcements, when Reynier's French Saxon 7th Corps arrived from the northeast. But the same day, the coalition received more than 100,000 reinforcements, as their armies continued to converge on Leipzig.
Damn!
Colloredo's Austrian 1st Corps, Bennigsen's Army of Poland, and Bernadotte's Army of the North, though the latter was widely criticized for his leisurely march to the battlefield. The next day, Napoleon would face odds of nearly 2-1. It was time for the Emperor to begin planning his retreat.
Damn, this is like all army has arrived. Now it's seriously critical, because from all front he's gonna fight double his number. And he also has disadvantage of being in that position, so just numbers are not enough. He's outnumbered even by the position. Every side he's got to take care of. And all the others who are flanking him from all the directions could, use some kind of tactics that could divert him and distract him. So this is going to be really dangerous.
On Monday morning, the sun shone across 40 square miles of battlefield, on which nearly 500,000 troops and 2,000 cannon were assembled. Soldiers from...
What I'm thinking is how much Europe must hate Napoleon that even his father-in-law didn't alive with him. He went with the coalition. I mean, he must have thought, yeah, he's married to my daughter, sure. But he's such dangerous and volatile, we must take him down. That's everybody's mentality right now.
France, Germany, Russia, Austria, Poland, Italy, Sweden, the Netherlands, and even Britain. This was truly the Battle of the Nations. In preparation for his withdrawal, Napoleon pulled back his forces into a tighter defensive perimeter and ordered Bertrand's 4th Corps to march west to secure the army's line of retreat. 2 divisions of the Young Guard under Marshal Mortier took their place at Lindenau. Schwarzenberg, meanwhile, planned to close the net on Napoleon with 6 converging attacks. Fighting in the south began around 8 AM. The Austrians took Dörlitz, but Marshal Oudinot led a counterattack at the head of a Young Guard division and drove them out again. Schwarzenberg was so alarmed by this reverse that he sent orders to recall Goulay's 3rd Corps. General Barclay's troops initially faced little opposition as they took Wachau and Liebert-Volkwitz, scenes of such bitter fighting 2 days before, but now scarcely defended. Barclay then paused, waiting for Bennigsen to get into position on his right, before continuing his attack.
I don't understand Napoleon's mentality here, because the position that he's in, he's surrounded by all sides. He's outnumbered 2-1. Usually when someone is at that position is when they are in defense mode, when their own country is getting invaded or something. In here, Napoleon is pushing back. He's not in France right now, he's trying to push back. So if he knows he's surrounded by all sides with the odds of 2-1, what is he going to do? Just take back village after they get take back and forth. This is not going to end with his victory, with that strategy. He's surrounded by all sides. So what is he thinking? Why isn't he just retreating back to France to, strengthen his numbers somehow? Or use some kind of tactics or something? Why is he just sticking here and fighting all sides? I mean, I don't see any possible way anyone could win this battle like that. And he's not in defensive mode, he's trying to attack them. He should retreat back to France. I don't understand why is he going through this. What's the point of killing half of your army and then retreating back?
Bennigsen's troops had more ground to cover, but towards noon, they'd driven back MacDonald's infantry and taken their objectives. They would now wait for Bernadotte's army to link up on their right. But the Army of the North was again making slow progress, for which many again blamed its commander, who seemed exceedingly cautious about facing his old master in battle.
I think it's Britain's money.
In contrast, did not hesitate to launch Russia.
With the Britain's money, rather than buying guns, they bought a lot of bows and laser things.
Infantry against Leipzig's northern defences, though their attack failed with heavy losses. By 2 PM, Napoleon was hard-pressed on all fronts, but holding his own. His attention was now focused on Probstheide, key to his southern front, under attack from Kleist's Prussian 2nd Corps. French troops had turned the village into a fortress and inflicted terrible losses on the advancing Prussians. Probstheide was soon engulfed in smoke and fire, as fighting raged on all sides. Some Prussian regiments lost half their men attacking the village, while 3 French generals were killed as they organized its defense.
Damn, poor villagers built their village out scratched with, all the hard work. And now it's getting destroyed. Lots of people are dying all around just to stroke some people's ego. So they can say and draw the line on a map saying, this is, I invaded everything, this is all mine.
Napoleon even sent in Friant's division of the Guard to reinforce the position. To the north, Bernadotte's army was finally joining the battle in earnest. Marmont had assembled 137 guns around Schönefeld, which poured fire into the Russian ranks. In response, Bernadotte massed 200 guns of his own. The fields were soon strewn with the dead and wounded, as the sheer weight of fire made it impossible for either side to advance. Around 3 p.m, von Bülow's Prussian Corps, supported by Austrian Jaegers and its small British rocket detachment, attacked Paunsdorf. Reynier's 7th Corps could not withstand the onslaught. An hour later, around 3,000 Saxon soldiers rushed over to the enemy and surrendered.
That is not a good sign. French people just went there and surrendered and went in their side. Damn.
The Saxons were deeply disillusioned with their French allies. Their main wish now was for a quick end to a war that had ravaged their homeland for many months. The hole in the line created by the Saxons' defection was soon plugged by Guard cavalry. But the coalition juggernaut could not be stopped. Towards dusk, under relentless Russian pressure, Marmont abandoned the burning ruins of Schönefeld, while the Prussians took Sellerhausen.
Look at the number, man, goddamn.
In the south, Probstheide still held, but the situation was grim for Napoleon.
The circle is just getting smaller and smaller. Like I said, what's the point of this? He should have just retreated, seeing the number, seeing how he doesn't have any tactical advantage.
The third day's fighting cost both sides another 25,000 casualties. Napoleon's army was exhausted, outnumbered, virtually encircled, and critically low on ammunition. Finally, the Emperor gave the order to retreat.
Damn, he should have given it sooner, man. And what's that going to achieve? Just dying.
Overnight, under cover of darkness and early morning fog, the French army withdrew behind Leipzig's walls, and at 4 a.m. began its retreat west, crossing the single bridge over the Elster River that led back to France. There'd been time and materials to build extra bridges, but in what would prove a serious oversight, no one had given the necessary orders. Furthermore, there was no clear plan for Leipzig's defence, which was left to a jumble of understrength units, mostly Poles and Germans. Napoleon left Leipzig around 10 a.m. Behind him there were scenes of mounting chaos and confusion, the city's streets jammed with troops, guns and wagons. The 20,000 wounded troops in the city had little hope of escape.
Damn, his army in mass is at Leipzig. Is, getting hard time leaving, and Napoleon just like left, like, they're gonna be fine.
30 minutes later, shells began to rain on the city, as the coalition launched an all-out assault from north, east and south.
Alright, what this tells me is that Napoleon at his later times don't care much. Not as he used to. He left major chunks of it army at Leipzig and just left. What if everybody just, panics? Coalition attacks and they loses a lot of chunks of the army. Napoleon being there could have done something.
The rearguard held the city's gates for as long as they could, but they were soon overwhelmed by the enemy, and savage street fighting broke out across the city. A barge packed with gunpowder had been moored beneath the Elster Bridge, so that it could be quickly destroyed after the rearguard crossed. Around 2 p.m, a corporal lit the fuse when he saw Russian soldiers on the far bank, even though the bridge was still packed with troops, wagons and horses.
Damn!
The bridge was destroyed in a gigantic explosion that trapped 30,000 men and 30 generals on the wrong side of the river.
What?
Panic broke out among those who suddenly found themselves cut off.
This is horrible, man. This feels like something from the Hollywood movies. Why did they all just went inside the Leipzig and trap themselves while retreating? They should have formed some kind of a rear guard or something outside of Leipzig. They could have held on while everybody makes their retreat from the city. Napoleon, by his 15-20% of his army was retreating. With them he just left. Everybody else left behind and just coalition just attacked. They just ran out of panic and somebody just put the blown the bridge while 30,000 of them, that's like 30% of his army, man, was still inside. Lots of generals. This is stupid. None of this feels more coordinated. It's just random. Napoleon don't care. They just in panic just blown the bridge, leaving 30,000 of his men inside. I think Napoleonic battles are going to end in the last videos really horribly, the way things are going right now.
Most became prisoners, but some tried to swim for it, including the Polish Prince Poniatowski, made a marshal by Napoleon just 3 days before. Weak from his wounds, he rode his horse into the river, but as it tried to climb the steep far bank, it rolled over him, and he was drowned.
Damn.
Marshal MacDonald had also been cut off by the blast, and resolved to escape or die trying. He found a place where engineers had cut down 2 trees as a makeshift bridge, and made his attempt. And there I was, 1 foot on either trunk and the abyss below me. A high wind was blowing. I was wearing a large cloak, and fearing that someone would grab at it, I got rid of it. I was already 3/4 of the way across when some men decided to follow me. Their unsteady feet caused the trunks to shake, and I fell into the water. Fortunately, I could touch the bottom, but the bank was steep, the soil loose and slippery. Some of the enemy's skirmishers came up. They fired at me point blank and missed me, and some of our men who happened to be nearby drove them off and helped me out. I was wet from head to foot, breathless and sweating heavily from my efforts. Marshal Marmont, who had got across early in the day, gave me a horse. I wanted dry clothes more, but they were not to be had.
He's talking about dry clothes. Damn. What surprises me that his men helped him during this time. That's commendable, because when situation like this where your retreat is cut off and every coalition is closing in on you, there will be a lot of panic. People would just everybody's life for themselves, and they would just protect their own selves. It's commendable that his men actually helped him while they were themselves were trapped and coalition army was closing in.
The loss of the bridge turned what was already a heavy defeat for Napoleon into a disastrous one. Later that day, the 3 allied monarchs met in the centre of Leipzig to celebrate their great victory. It had come at enormous cost. Exact numbers are impossible to establish, but in 4 days' fighting, the coalition armies suffered at least 52,000 casualties.
That's massive.
Napoleon, who could less afford such losses, came off worse. 47,000 killed and wounded, 35,000 taken prisoner, 325 guns lost.
Oh my god, 35,000 prisoners. Most of them, I think, which were left in Leipzig, and somebody just blew the bridge. I mean, was blowing up the bridge that important than to lose 30 plus thousands of your men? Because yeah, they could have followed, but I think once you're retreating, there's a, you could set up defenses so you could easily go to France and slow down their following you. I think blowing up the bridge, how much is that going to delay them? And losing 30,000 men, was that worth it? I think they didn't plan for that, but I think in panic, somebody just detonated the bomb without realizing that there are still 30,000 people inside. I think that was a blunder.
More men were killed and wounded at Leipzig than in any European battle before the First World War. Sir George Jackson, the British ambassador to Austria, rode over the battlefield with Metternich, the Austrian foreign minister, 2 days later. "A more revolting and sickening spectacle I never beheld," he wrote. "Scarcely could we move forward a step without passing over the dead body of some poor fellow, gashed with wounds and clotted with blood, another perhaps without an arm or a leg, here and there a headless trunk, or a head only, which caused our horses to stumble or start aside. It made one's blood run cold to glance upon the upturned faces of the dead. We got over this field of glory as quickly as we could."
All Europe was marching with us just a year ago. Yeah, because they were scared of you. Today all Europe is marching against us. Well, yeah, you screwed up massively while trying to invade Russia. Everybody sees you as weak now. So of course you're gonna strong arm lots of people. They're gonna, when the chance comes, they're all gonna turn against you, which happened.
Napoleon had suffered a calamitous defeat. He had lost the battle for Germany. His domination of Europe appeared at an end. With 80,000 survivors, he began a fighting retreat to the French border. There was now no chance of rescue for the 100,000 men trapped in garrisons across Germany and Poland.
See that?
Though some would hold out for another 5 months.
That's what I was saying at the start, that he should have called them out. Because if he loses this battle, have to retreat to France, what good are they to France? They're just trapped there, which they are now.
Marshal Murat took his leave of the emperor, assuring him of his loyalty, but secretly planning to cut a deal with the Allies to save his throne in Naples.
Again?
It was the last time the two men saw each other. 11 days after the Battle of Leipzig, Napoleon's former allies, the Bavarians, tried to block his escape at Hanau with 40,000 men. The Bavarian commander, von Wrede, had served with Napoleon in many campaigns. But on seeing his deployment for battle, Napoleon remarked, "I made him a count, but I couldn't make him a general." The French emperor then ordered the Imperial Guard to lead an attack that forced the enemy to fall back in disarray. The French army reached the safety of Mainz 3 days later. Napoleon himself pushed on to Paris to contain the political damage from his defeat.
He can't contain it.
Behind him, his empire was being dismantled. On the 4th of November, the coalition announced the dissolution of the Confederation of the Rhine, several of its former members now joining the war against France. In the Illyrian provinces, local revolts, Austrian invasion, and British naval support brought an end to French rule. In North Italy, Eugene was retreating steadily before the advance of von Hiller's Austrian army. While in Hamburg, Marshal Davout, with 34,000 troops, would soon be cut off and under siege.
Damn.
Napoleon's situation was desperate. But in the next campaign, fought for France itself, Napoleon would prove that he was still the master of war.
Really? I must watch this video. This last sentence got me excited. After against all odds, he's gonna pull out something in the while invasion in France. Damn. It is hard to see how he's gonna rally up his people. I mean, when you're getting invaded, you don't have choice but to get rallied up. But still, losing a massive army in Russia, losing here, he should have retreated way long before. He didn't. That gave chance coalition to close up. And then in Leipzig, lots of people got trapped there to retreat, you know, basically in panic. 30,000 of them, their people got trapped. He should have retreated long before. He would have much time to retreat. When he saw that he's getting surrounded by all sides, that's a defensive position. And he was not in defensive position. He should have just retreated back to France, because I know that you could argue that he was fighting at the place that he invaded, so it was his, but not really. Places around him was turning against him. At that time, it was fight for his life kind of thing. He should have just retreated back to France with whatever army he had left, and get ready for invasion from coalition. He stayed there, lost a lot of people got trapped, and then he retreated. What did that gain him? Damn, I think 2 videos are left. Napoleon Endgame France, and in the end Napoleon Wars Battle of Waterloo. I thought after watching this video, the next video is going to be just that, Napoleon losing, and just in sad so, but the last sentence he said, Napoleon is still master of his game or whatever. That got me, really excited, like next video is going to be awesome. Alright people, if you like my reaction, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And I will make sure that I do a reaction to these last 2 videos pretty soon and not waste too much time, because after this Napoleonic War, I want to do Alexander the Great's reaction from the Epic History TV. Alright, I'll see you next time.